ladies, gents, and everybody else in between. Welcome to another episode of Back for Our Future, the show that looks back to maybe prep for the future. And on this episode, we're talking about lots of different things. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, the guy who has the steel trappiest of steel trap memories, the guy who puts Nickney in Tony Nick Najati. Nike Jedi. For that story will come up at some point. That was a Bloodhound Gang thing, wasn't it? Was it Bloodhound Gang that called you that?
Yeah.
Tony Nick Najati, welcome to the show. Tony, good to see you again, brother. How are you?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing very well, man. I'm doing very well. It's been
Show today.
It's been a while when I shaved my face. Look at this.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
I'm back to looking like a
you know.
What was that?
I said I shaved too, but I didn't shave at all.
Yeah, I hear you. I've been trimming it back for a wee pinch, and then I was thinking about this show, and I was like, I'm gonna go shave my face so I look like I did kind of when I was a kid. I've never been able to grow much facial hair. My wife is pissed. It takes me like weeks to grow some, but I was like, there was a lot of gray in it, and mine was not evenly gray. It was like a little patch right here, and so I was like, nah, we're just gonna wait. Once it grays, I'll just gray out. I don't mind the gray here. I don't mind the gray at all. But this was like this splotchy weirdness that it almost looked like I had left. It looked like 90s hairdo. Remember that 90s? Horst had it. God love him. He had that 90s hairdo where you bleach the tips of your hair. It looked like that. Except gray.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Oh, it's all good. It happens to the best of us. So exciting episode. This is episode number 3. This episode is titled Midnight in the Garden of Movies and Popcorn, which is very important as we go through it. This episode is really focusing on midnight movies. Now, in fairness, we need to preface a small story with this, and then I'm going to let you kind of tee things up and start us off here. But in fairness, I suck at midnight movies. I have zero. I roll a 0 when it comes to midnight movies. I just don't have the skill to make it through. You, however, this is like a time-honored tradition. If you guys have seen the logo, our logo that's out there for the show, if you look, there's little hints of little fun things, and we're probably going to change it as we go along and add more to it. But there's a sandwich, and that sandwich is very important because it is part of our. We've talked about it a little bit, but that sandwich is a very big part of midnight movies. And of course, Tony and I love the show Wings, and you always got to reference the big sandwich.
Of course.
So with that said, Tony, tee us up. What are we talking about? Midnight movies. Let's kick it off.
Well, I mean, midnight movies were never really your thing because not only do you go to sleep a lot, but also I don't think your curfew was beyond that, right? Your curfew was before that. Back in this year.
My curfew was like 11. It was like 10:30 or something.
Yeah, it's like somewhere around there, and so I don't believe you and I went to like maybe one midnight movie, but it's coming up a little bit later on, one or two of them, but a little bit later on in the podcast. But this was more of an era where I would drag my mother to midnight movies all the time, incessantly. And in fairness, she is a night owl, so it's not something that's out of the realm. Like, oh, you're dragging your poor mom to a midnight movie where she's probably sleeping. No, she's usually awake.
And in equal fairness, you get it honest because you two are also a night owl. And we've talked about this on the show where half of our communication about this podcast and coordinating things takes place when I'm getting up and you have yet to go to bed.
That's true. I think it happened today too.
It sure did.
Yeah.
You were up earlier than me this time. You beat me to it, but I slept till 5 a.m.
That's
5 a.m.
is impressive. Yeah. It's like an extra half hour.
It was an extra half hour. It sure was. It absolutely was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, this is an era where I would definitely take my mom to a lot of midnight movies, some of which she actually wanted to go see, some of which I literally made her go with me because I wasn't driving yet. It's 1992. Right. We're still in 1992 here when this is going on, and I don't start driving until middle of October of 92 when my birthday is all the way in October, and so I get my license maybe like a week after my birthday. So it's like So she's going with me a lot to a lot of these, and she's a trooper. But the one thing I'd like to preface also is you're talking about the sandwich and everything else, is that you know we're pretty notorious for bringing our own food for the most part.
Pretty notorious. I think it's like part of our childhood lexicon that you knew
It's
if
not.
you were going with the Nick Najadis, you were going to get a sandwich or something. And your mom, again, so that people understand, Tony's mother is a fantastic. I would argue she could have gone on to Master Chef or any of those like home chef type shows where she would have crushed it. She is a fantastic cook. Specifically, the most dangerous thing she ever made for me were these mashed potatoes, these garlic. God bless those mashed potatoes she
Those are
used to
good.
make are just
Yeah, those
fudge.
are good.
They're
She's
just,
still
just
she's
excellent.
still a very good cook. But back in the day, we used to bring our own everything, like even popcorn.
Yeah. Yes, you
Last
did.
we had
Yes,
our
I do
own
remember.
microwave popcorn that we bring in our bag.
Yep.
We
Yep.
don't do that
Yep.
anymore. We don't do that anymore. But we still bring some of our own stuff.
The crazy part is, you think about it, and and maybe some viewers don't know, or listeners rather, having oddly, we made movies in a building that later became a dine-in movie theater, and we'll touch on that some, of course, throughout the course of the series. But one of the things that was interesting about this place here locally, it's called Nexus, and the wild part about being like working in a movie theater, like my office was there even afterwards, as I ran my films and my production company and my ad agency, I all ran out of that office for years. And the crazy thing about that was that we would talk about stuff and you would get the actual box office numbers. I would just ask and we would just have great conversations, just chit chat in the hallway. And you learn very quickly that movies don't pay, or at this time frame, I don't know about in the 90s, but now they don't pay squat. And really the only way they can make any money, these theaters, is off concessions. Back in the day, we never considered that because it wasn't really an issue, because theaters were going to be here forever. We're going to have movie theaters. No one would get rid of a movie theater, and they did.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's funny you brought in their own popcorn, because nowadays, I think I talked a little bit about it last time, and I know I told you about it. I went to an Alamo to see Ghostbusters 2 Frozen Empire. Better name for that movie would have been Ecto Cooler, by the way. I think it would have just smashed it. Just personal opinion. But anyway, Alamo has a deal where they bring you, you pay $6 or something like that, and you get unlimited popcorn, but it comes out in a metal bowl, which is very reminiscent of it like took me back to this very conversation talking about it. So very fun thing that they have, very limited. If you have a chance to go see movies in Alamo, I think it's a fun treat to go do so. All right, back to the piece here. Midnight movies, you brought your own snacks, you brought your mother. She had to see some terrible stuff. She saw some great stuff.
I mean, they were good movies. I mean, the movies were fine.
Yeah.
And one of the first ones we kind of start out with in 1982 is Final Analysis.
Is that Richard Gere?
Richard Gere, Kim Basinger. I know we've mentioned it on the show already.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why we keep mentioning this movie, but we have done it a few times now. So this movie's noted because it's a good film, and I actually spoke to my mom about it like a week ago, and she's like, "Oh, I love Final Analysis." So she did love this film, but and I enjoyed it too. And for who hasn't seen it, it's a great thriller starring Richard Gere, Kim Basinger, and Thurman. So good film. Saw it in February of 1982. Completely empty theater at midnight. Completely
of course.
empty. 2 people, both of us. That's it. Still remember my mom talking like this in the middle of the movie.
Right.
Because she's like, when else are we going to get to do that?
Right. That's right.
That's a good point. So we had
Right.
a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun in there that night for sure.
So that film does it have a bunch of explicit scenes in it? I don't remember it. It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
This is the part that always kind of weighs on your mind when you're like, you saw that movie with your mom. What kind of explicit scenes were there in it? It does have some sexual scenes in that film. Yes. It's not,
as
it's
a
not
young
bad. I mean, it's just,
I'm just thinking, as a young man of our age bracket, that movie featuring, Uma Thurman would have been young, but Kim Basinger was the bee's knees.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And the fact is, if any of those scenes, and again they may, but I don't remember, if they did feature her, that's a pretty good treat. That's a nice treat as a young guy if you're wanting to, she's one of your A-list celebrities that we all had crushes on at some portion. Especially we get a little bit later in this year, and I noted on the cheat sheet here, that movie. No, she's not in that one, is she?
Who?
No, she's in the regular Batman. Kim Basinger's not in Batman Returns, right?
No, no, no.
Yeah.
She's in.
Okay. So Kim Basinger, that's all I'm saying. All right. Final analysis. You check that out. Isn't it about a shrink? It's like a pretty heavy movie for a 15-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, this is this. You'll. I mean, if we go even further back into my life, even younger. I mean, I was watching pretty heavy movies pretty early on. Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
was
right,
one
right.
of those things. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I didn't have. I mean, they weren't really. My parents were always pretty cool about that. Um, try not, don't mimic what you've seen in the movie. Don't do any of that kind of
Right.
stuff. As long as you're, cool and you're not, coming out of this movie cussing and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, you're good. And yeah, I mean, I got to see a lot of rated R films pretty early on. There was a few that they kind of didn't want me to watch right away. Like
Right.
first one I can think of right off the bat's First Blood. Sylvester Stallone. I wanted.
That's such an interesting thing because it is a fairly violent movie, I guess. I mean, in fairness, of being a good parent, that is a pretty graphic film, I
I mean,
suppose, and
I
very
was
adult
much young
themed.
when it first came
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah,
I was much
yeah, yeah.
so that was like that's the movie I can remember that they were kind of like, no, not right this minute. You get away maybe a couple of years for that. But I mean, I got to see movies way earlier than almost everyone I know.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, you were always the one that was like, dude. It was one of those things. Like we would get the schoolyard rundown from Tony, if you will. The street rundown, really, is what it was,
but
which
it
is
was
always a good
good. I
thing.
mean, but it was good. Final Analysis, great film, and yeah, it was had some sexually explicit stuff in it. If that's what you're looking for, and you haven't checked it out, Kim Basinger, Uma Thurman, it's a really good film.
Cool, very good.
I do drag my mom into some crazy stuff that year though, because
Right.
in May of in May 1982, May 22nd, 1982, I'm going to drag her into Alien 3.
Right, which I think is Alan Smithied, right? Is it not Alan Smithy? It's David Fincher, but it's Alan
Sure.
Smithied, isn't it?
He definitely.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not technically Alan Smithy because he.
Okay.
I mean, the DGA made him take it. I mean, so
Hmm.
his name is on that film, but he's kind of distanced himself from it over the course of the years now. But
Just so the audience, if you aren't familiar, Alan Smithy and what Tony's talking about with the DGA is like if you're a director and you're very unhappy with a movie you made, usually a studio film is how it goes, but if you're very unhappy with it, used to be you could use the name Alan Smithy. So if you go look up David Lynch, I think Alan Smithied Dune, and I think it's one of these things of where if you didn't like the movie or you weren't happy or you didn't want your name on it, you would just use this name Alan Smithy. Eventually that went away, which is what Tony's talking about. And the Directors Guild, the union, said, no, you got to put your name on it. It was a large studio film. The thing about Alien 3, I found it to be, of all the Alien movies, now, and I'm just throwing my 2 cents in, I'll let you jump back in, but my 2 cents is, of the Alien movies, Alien 3, well, Alien is the scariest hands down to me. It's a haunted house in space, but Alien 3 really freaked me out. It really bothered me because we had just come from Aliens. I loved Hicks. I like Michael Biehn. He's my jam. He'll always be my jam. When he showed up in Mandalorian, I lost my mind. He's one of my faves. But the fact is that he dies. I mean, there's no spoilers on the show, folks. These movies are decades old. So the fact that he's gone and Newt's gone and the only person you get really is Ripley, it kind of jacked with my brain a little bit. And I think it's what made it, because it was such a bleak movie. It's an alien movie that doesn't have really a great resolution to it. Not even like a horror film. It has like a really earth-shattering, heavy ending. And I always just remember, but now I've talked to friends that are huge Alien fans and Dan Anderson, Kenny Peterson, guys like that grew up with us, and they're still Worley. They're still very much, they love that movie. It's important to them. So as Alien fans go, though Lyncher David Lynch, Fincher may have distanced himself from it. some fans have gone back to it. So, all right, Alien 3. You take your mom to see Alien 3. How does that go over?
It's the last Alien movie she's seen. She's never seen another one after that. she,
Well, there you go. There you go.
she had seen all the Alien movies leading up to it. Because
Right.
I remember watching Aliens in New Jersey with my family, like on a VHS, of course.
Yeah. Right.
But
Right.
but and it was funny because I actually go the roundabout way to seeing these movies. Like I saw Aliens. That was the first one I saw.
Right.
I had to go back to see Alien because that
That's
was
the same. That's the same.
right. And I think a lot of people, especially in our age group, because Alien came out when we were when I was a baby, essentially.
Yeah, I wasn't born. It was 77, I
Yeah,
believe.
and
Yeah.
it was very very young, and I didn't see that one right away, and so I saw Aliens, which obviously we all thought was amazing, and
Oh, dude, it's a great action movie, right?
right,
I mean, it's the
you're like,
perfect action movie.
and then you're like, oh, there's another one of these.
Right. Right.
You gotta go back catch Alien, and then I dragged my mom to this one at 15 years old to go see Alien 3, which I thought was quite good. I really enjoyed this film. It's
I remember you coming out of the theater, and I think one of your favorite performances in it was I can see his face, African American guy, round head, bald,
Charles S. Dutton.
Charles S. Dutton. You were
Yeah.
obsessed. You were you came out and you were
Well,
like, this dude is my guy, and it was like, all right, cool. Yeah.
love him. In this era, he'd be in the Fox show Rock, and
Oh yeah, that's right.
of course, the next year he's going to be in one of my all-time favorite films. He's going to be in Rudy.
That's right.
We'll
That's
get to that film in a later time,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, that's a
But,
whole episode basically.
But yeah, but Alien 3, yeah, he's great in that. And so, I mean, I enjoyed it. It's a different feel. If you're big into the Marines of Aliens, maybe this one didn't get you as much. You didn't like it as much because they're basically on a colony, and it's basically like a jail, like a prison colony.
Yep.
So yeah,
Is William Fincher in this?
Fichtner, yeah.
No? Yeah, Fichtner. Yeah, he's also in it. I remember him being kind of that's my first introduction to him, and I remember I like this guy. And later on, I've followed his career because I've always enjoyed his performances as well. I mean, it's got an interesting cast of people that went on to do some really fun, great performances in other movies. But it was for me, it was a little bit of a gateway to some of these guys that I'd never seen before because they had to cast all these dudes. And if I remember, the plot line of this just briefly is they crash or something, everybody dies except for Ripley, and then she's on a prison planet and it's all dudes except for her.
Yeah, basically, it's kind of picking up from Aliens when she gets away,
Yep.
and that whole thing with her and Bishop, and that whole deal, and then
That's right. Bishop's still there.
and then they go into this colony of prisoners and all the hijinks but there's an alien that's come with them,
Right.
of course.
Right.
So,
That's right.
of course, because you got to bring the aliens. It's not
You
alien.
got to bring the alien. Listen, bring the aliens, baby.
Right.
You got to bring them.
Yeah, so they come back, and all the hijinks happens, and my mom hiding her eyes and worrying about aliens popping out of the popcorn and all that fun stuff.
Now, somewhere in this is just a random piece of shit in my brain as we talk about, how my brain works. Somewhere along the line, and I believe it's Alien 3, this happens, toys are introduced. Children's toys are introduced, and I can't remember when it is. I'm sure there's somebody listening that knows, but I remember there being alien toys and there was marine toys and they went back, but it wasn't during Aliens. I believe it's Alien 3 that they actually start coming out with alien toys, like action figures for us to play with, essentially G.I. Joes for us to play with. And I remember that being something down the pipeline. I can't remember if it was Alien 3 or Alien 4 where it happened, but I'm pretty sure it's Alien 3 where somewhere in that range they come out, which is wild to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alien 3. That's around the time those toys came out. Yeah.
It's so wild. I mean,
I don't know, but yeah, it's in that era. Yeah.
It's such a graphic movie to give kids toys to, but it happened. I mean, they had Rambo toys as well. So
yeah, I mean, they weren't like Alien 3 based. I mean, they're just like aliens.
Right.
They just had I mean, they were pretty. I mean, they were cool, but they were kind of scary.
Yeah.
In spots.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you're a little kid.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. I mean, but they were neat though. I know somewhere in the storage area. There exists quite a few of them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember. I remember. Anyway, like I said, that just popped in my brain. I always thought that was an interesting, an odd crossover to make for a hard R rated movie. I mean, a very hard R movie. Here's some kids' toys. It seems so crazy.
What's So I mean, that's always been a great, a great franchise of films. What's your favorite Aliens film?
Dude, I'm an Aliens guy. I love Aliens because of the late great Bill Paxton. I mean, that guy is so good as Hudson. I almost said Bill Hudson. Hudson is such a great character, and Aliens was one of those movies that was like teenage contraband because there's so much language in it that when we got to watch it, and I remember I did see that movie with not in theaters, obviously it was VHS bootleg or whatever it was, but I watched that with Jonathan Green, and I remember very explicitly like terrified of the aliens. In fact, I still have like weird reoccurring dreams. They bother me. That the H.R. Geiger art really messes with my head, but I absolutely love the GI Joe-ish element of that. And then I also, that's my introduction. That movie introduced me to Paul. What's his name? Paul. Golly, the guy that's the bad guy that works for. He's a comedian. He was on that show with Ellen,
Yeah,
and
Paul
they had a
Reiser.
show. Paul Reiser, thank you. I didn't know Paul Reiser was a comedian. To me, he was just this a-hole in an aliens movie. It's one of those kind of things.
He's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, he's
What
great.
about you? What's your jam?
I mean, they're all kind of different in a lot of ways. So I mean, but Aliens will always be that movie. I mean, the feel of those Marines
Oh yeah, dude.
trying to battle the aliens is just
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, and as a, it it's still a fun movie. I see it every once in a while, and I'll watch it. Just watch pieces of it when it's on, and it's still a fun movie. Like I still enjoy it. Even like the miniatures are fun. I mean, just the whole process of that film and that's James Cameron, who obviously goes on to become the biggest director of all time. But it is a very fun movie, and it is a connection on that side of it.
It's
So you
amazing.
go see Alien 3. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's amazing. Just to add on to Aliens real quick, I mean, it's amazing how James Cameron can make a movie an event. I mean, that's his thing.
Sure can.
I mean, he's
You're
good
right.
at that, and that's why everyone always remembers his films. I mean, he's
You're
really
spot on.
great at making each movie he makes an event. And that's
One hundred
that's kind of
percent.
that's kind of his trademark to me.
Oh yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I mean, if you look at the Avatar films alone, I mean that puts it in case. I'll tell you another guy in the '90s who did that, and it's a little bit of a segue, but another guy that did that in the '90s because of the amount of stuff he created, not so much now, is Tim Burton. Tim Burton, that guy's style was so different than anybody else's coming up in the '90s. Like his stuff really stood out. You knew you were watching a Tim Burton movie, whether it was Beetlejuice, whether it was Batman, or Batman Returns, which I believe is queued up for you. So
Yeah,
tee us up on the Batman Returns, and we've got to talk about the Penguins. I mean, there's so many little lines that have come out of that in the course of our history. But Batman Returns, midnight screening. Is it a premiere of this movie you're going
yeah.
to?
So as we said, final analysis: nobody in the theater. Alien
Yeah.
3, a lot more people in the theater because that's more of a premiere. This is definitely the midnight 12:01 first screening of Batman Returns. Everybody's there, packed house. It was an event for sure, and I loved every second of this movie from start to
Yeah.
finish. I had been waiting for it. I had seen Batman while I lived in New Jersey in 1989. Obviously, I saw it in the theaters in 1989 with a friend of mine. That was right before I moved to Mobile, Alabama, and
Right.
and so I saw that movie, loved it, thought it was probably one of the greatest films, and then this was coming, and I was always
Right.
a huge Michael Keaton fan, and Batman Returns was coming, and all of a sudden, I knew the Penguin was going to be in it. I knew the Catwoman was going to be in it. It was going to be like a kind of a bigger feel to it, and I was all about it from the starting word of it.
Yeah.
From the jump, and yeah, it was great, man. It was it was an event for sure. Everybody was, like I said, packed house, loaded theater, um, Penguins. The time has come. Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
that line alone, I cannot reiterate or stress. There's no way I'll ever be able to tell you the number of times that has been said to me by Tony over the course of 30 plus years, 40 years, whatever it is now. It is literally 30 years. It is literally one of the lines. It has been used on set when we're making movies together. Like I just knew and occasionally I do have a memory of like we were working on one of the movies and I was running a little behind and Tony being the AD was monitoring time and making sure we're on schedule. And I just remember him saying, Penguins, the time has come to me. And I was like, oh shit, I'm out of time. And so I literally had to hustle up through it, but it became, I knew what that meant. Nobody else around us knew what that meant, but he and I, because we had this language, I knew exactly what it was. That movie's crucial. I remember seeing it and I don't have it in here. It's actually at home. I have a toy from that shout out to Mr. Jim Needle, Mr. Pickles. He found another one. I have a toy. It was a Batman toy that had a little belt and you would pull the belt
yeah,
and you could hook him on stuff and you let him go and he would slide up the little cable, right? Well,
yeah.
I had one forever. And when Jim and I worked together, I had this, it was my original Batman toy. I brought it to the office because all editors, we have tchotchkes on our desk like weirdos. You can see them behind me. And so I had this little Batman and I was swinging it around and it broke and it shoots across the room and it hits the owner of this huge company right square in the chest. And he just looks at me. He's like, why do you have a toy? That's what he said. Why do you have a toy? And he picked it up and chunked it in the trash can. So Jim eventually gets me another one. So thankfully I have one. It's broken. As soon as I opened it out of the package, I pulled the string, excited, pulled the strings. I was so excited. And it now it just dangles. He doesn't do anything anymore. He's just stuck in. Anyway, so Batman Returns is huge. That's a huge movie. It's massive. You get again. I think that's an introduction to a lot of character actors as kids that later on in life we see in other great movies. Christopher Walken, right? Which all I knew of him of is a villain because it's incredible the impression that they make. Michelle Pfeiffer. We can't skip over the fact that her in that Catwoman suit is still the sexiest Catwoman that's ever lived. I
Yeah.
mean, I loved, what was the original lady's name
Well,
in the Batman?
it just depends on which one, because there's three of them in the original
Is
Batman.
there three that was in the original Batman? Like the old Ping Pow
Yeah, yeah,
punch Batman? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's Julie Newmar. There's Eartha Kitt. There's
Eartha
one.
Kitt is the one that I grew up with.
Yeah, and she's the black she's Black Catwoman. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's Lee Merriweather, who I worked with,
Yeah, that's right.
and
That's right.
she's from the actual movie, the original
Yeah.
Batman
So
movie. Right.
that's right. That's right. The one I remember the most was Eartha Kitt because that's the episode I watched the show and she was
Yeah,
a lot on the show on that side of it. And I remember anyway.
yeah. Her and Julie
So
Newmar.
you get, yeah, both of those. Yeah. And you get this great Catwoman is my point. And that's Michelle Pfeiffer to me. That's like a nice, again, not to make everything, I'm just remembering what it was as a teenager, I promise not every movie on this list is going to have me talking about how hot some person was to me. Um, but there's quite a few. I was a young guy. Anyway, so Batman Returns is awesome, and this cat and Danny DeVito. Like for me, I remember him, but I wasn't allowed to watch the movie Twins, which I believe came out before this. Correct?
It did.
It was in the '80s, wasn't it? Yeah. I wasn't allowed to watch that movie for some reason. I'm not sure why, but my parents knocked that one off the list. And so anyway, so for me, this was my Danny DeVito experience, and he's like his performance in this movie. If for some reason you haven't seen it in a while, I hope you've seen it. His performance in this movie is outstanding. It is
Really?
outstanding.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite performance he's ever done. And I know there's a lot of Sonny fans out there, but God bless, he's so good in this movie. It's incredible.
As a matter of fact, this was the movie where they kind of dialed back Michael Keaton's dialogue, and
Yep.
he dialed it back too, and so that those guys could all kind of chop up the screen a little bit more, and really have great performances, which they all were really good. I really love Batman Returns. To me, this is still one of the best superhero films that exists. I like it, but because not everything's shot against green screen and everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Back
No,
in the day, they had more practical sets, and it was a lot more fun.
and it's great because it being Tim Burton, it has its own world and feel. And what's interesting to me is I still think the Batman films that Burton made are the gold standard for which everybody else compares other Batman films to. Not necessarily all superhero films, but the Batman films to him, because of how iconic and great. And in my own brain, that anytime I see Gotham, I see Tim Burton's Gotham. I don't see anybody else's, and it'll forever be the established line of it. And you get to explore more of it in Batman Returns than any of the other Batman movies, and I think that's what makes it such an interestingly a good movie. Top in my like top 10 superhero movies all time, no doubt. I mean, it's just candidly fantastic.
You know, I mean, I love it because like when you go down into the sewer with the penguin and the penguins and all that fun stuff.
Oh gosh,
I mean, those are real sets. You know, I mean
yeah.
that's what's great about that. Whereas, you know, nowadays a lot of that stuff's shot against green screen, like I said, and those they're not all. It's not that world. You know, they're making it later on.
And arguably, that's probably what's missing from a lot of movies when we talk about them. For a lot of us, I think is not the nostalgia side. It's the craft of filmmaking has changed. It's a lot of VFX work, and as we know in the industry, if anybody's listeners may not be in, one of the challenges of the VFX side of things is that VFX often gets just overworked, and it's almost sometimes, even though they know the shots can be VFX, it's an afterthought. Hence, that's why there's been so much talk in our industry about there being a VFX union, so forth and so on. Interestingly enough, I appreciate that film because of that amount of work. I wonder if there's some EPK or something out there that you can find where you get a little more BTS of how they're making the movie, because I bet it is just outstanding. I'm sure it exists somewhere.
Oh yeah, without question. Yeah, I mean it's pretty remarkable stuff, really. Yeah,
100%. I'd love to sneak a peek at that.
it'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, sneak a peek. The other thing about this movie too is, I mean, so far, like all these midnight movies, one of the great places that we were watching these all was at the Carmike 10, the West
Yep.
Mobile. This is where all these
Right.
pretty much are. And we hadn't really talked about that yet, but that's something that we love
I was
talking
going to
about
ask.
on the show is where we're seeing these films. And
Yep.
we see all these pretty much at the Carmike 10 because that's the theater that was newer and it had, ability to stay open on that side of town a little bit more. So,
But I don't remember. Did the other theaters do midnights? Because I don't remember all the other theaters doing them.
yeah, like I said before, I mean, like they had, Springdale would have them every once in a while. That's the one that did, the Dick Tracy shirt night,
Yep. That's right.
stuff like
That's right.
that. But I mean,
Episode 2.
yeah, I mean, again, but that was before, Carmike, that Carmike 10 came in. So,
Got it.
so once that Carmike 10 came in, it was pretty much midnight movies were pretty much always in West Mobile at the Carmike 10.
There we go.
Yeah, or which would eventually become the Carmike 14, but that's later on.
That's down the road a little bit.
But I mean, and then of course, that year is just loaded with these types of films. And we're seeing so many, and I know, in September we'd see the movie Sneakers.
Oh, dude. Yeah, Sneakers was the first time I saw a spy type thriller. I just remember it left a big impression. I saw a spy type thriller. Dane Aykroyd. I remember him being in it. But like I remember watching that movie, and that became. It's a heist in some ways too. That movie becomes the movie for me as a young guy that as a filmmaker down the road. I can go back to Sneakers saying like I remember it very explicitly and how good that movie was. I saw it with my dad. I remember that part because he and I both just loved it. We just loved the fact that it was this heist movie. It had some, kind of sci-fi stuff in it, but it wasn't sci-fi in the sense of like it was like tech that later on now seems completely antiquated, but at the time was big tech, and now we know all this stuff actually exists. But great movie. I absolutely adore Sneakers. It's not about shoes, in case you haven't seen it, folks.
Oh,
it's
right.
not a shoe movie. No, not at all.
Good film though. I mean, Robert Redford, Mary McDonald.
Yep,
You get the late River Phoenix in that.
that's right.
That's
right.
It's really a good cast and great storyline. It's got a lot of suspense in it. Yeah, I mean it's a good film.
It's
for
funny
sure.
too.
It's got
very
a lot of,
funny.
yeah. Well, it's got Dan
Yeah.
Aykroyd, of course, and he's
Yeah.
fun as well. Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty brilliant. And we saw that one in September, and that was a lot of fun again at the Carmike 10. Once again,
Yep.
sneaking our stuff in. Not as many people in that theater that for that one because it's a little bit
Right.
late. Yes, yeah, but yeah.
Now, I don't even know. I see this next movie on the list you have here. I don't remember the movie Night in the City. You're going to have to tee that whole thing up because I don't even.
This is
I
this one is a little bit more eclectic. I like to add it because it was kind of a fun night. It was one of those movies that we wanted to go see a movie. It's the new Robert De Niro, Jessica Lange movie that was coming out, and you know I was at this point I'm at the Arnold School and going to the Arnold School, and I remember there being an article in the newspaper about this movie, and I was talking to one of my teachers at the time, and she's like, "Oh, are you gonna go see the new Robert De Niro film?" And I was like, I probably will. And so then I, you know, said, "Mom, you want to go see Night in the City? Let's go see Night in the City." And she's like, "Yeah, okay, that's great. It's a little bit more of my mom's speed than Alien
right,
3 and the movie that's going to come up
right,
after this one." But
right.
but yeah, I mean, it's a great film. I mean, again, it's got a lot of comedy. A lot of drama and stuff like that. Um, it's got some sexual situations again.
Oh, there we go. There we go,
Yeah,
folks.
so again, I'm in the awkward scenario there with my mom, but that's okay. But but yeah, great performance by Robert De Niro. You get some Jack Warden in there, and Jessica Lange, Alan King. Good cast. I mean, really
Oh yeah,
veteran,
it's really good cast,
older guys, but yeah, good stuff.
but definitely targeted towards an probably not a 15-year-old. I would say
Definitely, definitely not. I'm 16 at this point. If that makes any,
16. You're right. October 16th. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
but
Definitely not. Yeah.
but yeah, it's not exactly the movie that normal 16-year-olds are watching. But it was great, and part of the thing that's great about this film is the backdrop of it is boxing because first of all it's a remake, and Robert De Niro wants to be a boxing promoter in this film. And so there's like this great backdrop of boxing, which I kind of enjoyed. So it's kind of got a backdrop of sports in it too, which obviously is my thing.
Right, and boxing specifically, you used to watch a lot of boxing with your granddad. Is that
A lot
there's
of
a tie
boxing
in
with
there?
my dad back in the day, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Back when I
yeah,
thought boxing was really, really cool, but not as good
yeah.
now. Back then, I liked
No,
a
I
lot
get
more.
it. Hey, look, boxing and pro wrestling, they go hand in hand, in my opinion. But that's a different hot take for another day.
That's true.
All right, tee it up because I see something on the list, and there's a gag that comes out of this that he goes like this, and that's been done a million times in our lives. Um, I never saw this movie until I was, oh, man, I must have been in my late teens, early 20s, just because it was, my mom doesn't like anything scary. So I was forbidden to see this. And it wasn't really a contraband movie for me because I think it's a dense version of this story. It was very heavy. I think the only major attraction to me was, of course, the fact that Keanu Reeves is in it. I did not appreciate or understand who the hell I almost say Gary Gary Oldman was. If this movie stars Gary Coleman, it's a whole different story. Um, yeah, just totally different. Um, but Gary Oldman, I just didn't fully understand how crucial of an actor this guy's going to be for all of acting, all of filmmaking going forward. All right, we're talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula. Um, yeah,
This is a good
take it
film, man.
away.
Good film. See, it's coming up in the paper. Saw that there's gonna be a midnight. I was like, Bram Stoker's Dracula, midnight, Carmike 10, gotta
Oh
go,
yeah,
must see film of the year, have to be there. Mom's like, a Dracula movie, really? Like you want me to go see a Dracula movie with you, really? She hates those. Absolutely cannot stand to watch Dracula films.
right.
It's not her character at all. Not into the not. Mom's not really a horror person. I've dragged her to some horror movies.
Clearly,
Yes, that doesn't make me a great son by any means. Okay, but
fantastic.
she has done it. She's been the trooper. In fairness, I see a lot of her films as well. That stuff that I will always see every movie, but I see a lot, some of the stuff. I'll let her pick. This is definitely a Tony pick, without question.
Right.
Again, midnight, packed house. A lot of people wanted to see it. Yeah, I mean, it was every bit as gory and crazy and sexual and just good from start to
Oh
finish.
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
The cast is so amazing. I mean, Anthony Hopkins is Van Helsing, and like you said, Keanu Reeves is in, and Gary Oldman, and you get Winona Ryder, and just it's and of course of course Bill Campbell's going to be in it. He's the one who does
Yep.
the shtick with
Yeah.
the
The
knife.
classic. He goes like this.
He goes like this, and he stabs him right in the chest. And of course, I'm
Yeah.
doing that to you the whole time. You've never seen the film yet.
That is correct.
Yeah,
That
you had
is
no idea
absolutely
what the heck
accurate.
I was doing. And you're like, "What is that from?" And I was like, "It's from Bram Stoker's Dracula. You'll like it eventually when you see it."
Yeah, I just knew that you were going to stab me whenever I saw you. I would get a stab. It'd be like, "Hey, what's up?" And he goes like this, and it would happen over and over and over again, like clockwork. Young men, just being young men, being stupid. But that was like one of our bits. I do you remember who directed that by the top off the top of your
Yeah,
head?
Francis Ford Coppola. Yep.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah,
So
it's a great film.
again, a movie that clearly is stacked with cast, but then has a legendary director on top of it. And it's one of those off on this list, just like looking over it. We have favorites that we talk about and we say these things, but I would easily say if you're only going to see one movie of the movies we mentioned, I would argue and that you should potentially rewatch or watch for the first time if you were me at a young age. Watch Bram Stoker's Dracula. It is just hands down stacked with a great cast, great performances, and it's extremely gorgeous in its own haunting way. It's a great film that way.
All the sets are amazing in that
They're
film.
insane.
I mean, just beautiful, and the colors, and it's just everything about the film in theater was just remarkable. And I've seen it a lot since then, on TV and things like that, and on DVD and stuff. And it's just that movie illustrates how much you should see things in theaters as much as you can.
100%.
That movie with the castles and all the visuals and the colors and everything else just pops so much when you're watching it in a dark theater. It was a lot of fun and definitely an experience that I don't forget.
It brings up a good point that we've often we've touched on, but this is a good moment to bring it up. Is the idea of like you're going to see a movie in the theater, and certainly something like that film was shot for scope. And if we want to compare that shot for meaning it's a big picture, it needs to be seen on a big screen. The sets are big. If we take something more modern, I would argue all movies are great to see in the theater because it's an
Right.
experience. But current movie, I would argue is like it got a lot of buzz was Dune 2 or Dune, either one of the Dunes, the new Dunes, anyway, the Denis Villeneuve. Those movies are worth seeing in the theater because of the scope of it, if you're into that kind of thing, because they're built to be seen on a large screen. And I think a lot of times it's because of our phones, it has changed the way that a lot of people consume media. And I think they miss out on or even a giant, it's not even the same at home. There are certain pieces of art that deserve the respect of the way the film is treated. And I think this is often overlooked. When we're talking about film and we go back and we talk about these movies that are being projected, there is science behind that. There is art in the projection that is so far down the pipeline, how the film was processed, how they treated it, how they color timed it, all these little attributes that only we take for granted now in the digital age, but back then that was an art form and a craft that is just crucial. The way the film was projected. And frankly, in many cases, if you didn't see many of these movies early enough, the films actually would get worn down a bit and the gates would get a little bit more noisy. And you would end up with prints that weren't as clean and pristine as they were when they first rolled out. And so back in this time frame, the urgency to see the movie wasn't just about seeing the movie first. It was because you wanted to see the damn print as clean as humanly possible and you had to do it early. And I think that's something that's missing from a modern that I wish we still had. I don't want degradation by any means, but just to put into people's minds, like maybe consider, if you don't go to the theater all the time, just maybe consider finding a movie where you hear about the scope and let it be a moment where you're going to appreciate the scope of a film, how big it's going to look to you and how impressive. And Batman and Bram Stoker's Dracula is a prime example. Batman too, but Bram Stoker's Dracula is a prime example of a perfectly scoped film, very well presented, and it's worth seeing theatrically. And I think that's just an important bit.
Yeah, I mean that's a great take on it for sure, and explaining that to people that may not know what you're talking about. That was, I mean, that's really well put. But yeah, I mean this is a class to me. It's a classic film. I mean, I know it's there's other Dracula's been a character, a time honored character, and of course it's not new territory that they were in. But I mean the story's been is timeless. But you know to me that telling of it was absolutely remarkable.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's probably the best rendition of a classic horror character that's ever the classic universal monster that's ever existed. Is that version of it for sure?
Yeah, pretty good stuff. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. Of one of the midnight movies that of the midnight films that we've talked about. This was definitely one of my favorite moments for sure, and one of the movies that my mom still brings up to this day. That hey, I went to go see Bram Stoker's Dracula, which actually she did enjoy it though. She did
Yeah.
enjoy it. She did enjoy it, but there's a lot of blood going on in that film, and
Oh
and,
yeah.
and sexual scenes, and it's got everything. It's got everything
Yeah.
we've been talking about.
It's 100%. It's the apex of all that. So I think it's interesting that one of the films you bring in here is an interesting one, because it's another one of those movies that I overlooked for years. But knowing you and having had our friendship for as many years as we've been friends, it's a very big film for you. And then you tied in later on. But when you saw, and this is at like almost some of the height of oh my God, I just saw his face and my name blank. Not Woody Harrelson. Who's the other guy in it?
Wesley Snipes.
Thank you. This is at the height of Wesley Snipes' hype. I mean, this is big time Snipes, and that's White Men Can't Jump. That movie, you came out of that. I remember you talking more about that movie. Obviously, the Dracula gag was there, but I remember you talking about White Men Can't Jump for years. For
Oh yeah,
years, that movie. Yeah,
love this movie. I just saw it last week again.
right.
I mean,
See,
I this was always one of my favorite movies. It came out in March 27th of 1992, and this is one of those movies. Obviously you and I didn't see it together, but I saw it with again a good friend of mine, Richard,
yep.
and we saw it pretty much close to opening night. And you know this was a movie that we got a ride to the theater, Carmike 10 again, because this was a sleepover at my house, so it was Carmike 10 because we were in West Mobile. So
Right.
Carmike 10, Richard and I go. White Men Can't Jump. Um, Mom decides to go to the theater as well, but not to this movie. She goes because it's basketball related and everything else. She is not really into it, so she goes to see Straight Talk with Dolly Parton.
Oh boy, what a contrast.
But we had a blast watching this film. White Men Can't Jump. It's to me, it's one of the sports films. I mean, it's two guys chopping it up. Woody and Wesley, they were buddies. I mean, they had been in a few movies together already by that point. Wildcats and stuff. It's just they were already buddies. They were good friends, and this movie's just loaded with great performances again and hilarious scenes.
It is a great film. It's one of those ones where it's in that March time slot, so it's probably overlooked in that era a little bit. But the word of mouth on the film was because this is also in peak basketball, right? We're talking about 92 is Bulls are blowing up. This is huge
Yeah,
basketball time.
this is
Like this
big.
is
I mean, like,
major basketball.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and it came out in March. So, I mean, you're dealing with March Madness and college
Right.
basketball at the time, and Duke was hot at the time, and
Oh
and
yeah.
so I mean, it was it's got its era for sure. I mean, it did really well. It was a big hit, but I mean, it was one of those films that I couldn't wait to see it when it came out. I was blown away by it, and my connection to this movie and to these guys after the fact is pretty amazing. I mean, I did I saw this film obviously in 1992, In 2006, I would get offered a movie in Las Vegas called The Grand, and I'd go shoot out in Las Vegas at the Golden Nugget Casino with Woody Harrelson,
Yeah, incredible.
and then he was good friends with one of the guys from White Men Can't Jump, Silk Cozart, who plays the security guard and Wesley Snipes' buddy in the film, one of his buddies
Right.
in the film that they play against, and that helps get Woody Harrelson onto the lot to at the Jeopardy lot.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and he was great too, and all those guys were great. And I would have lunch with Woody and Silk, and we talk about this movie every once in a while, and had a blast. I mean, hanging out with Woody, man, in Las Vegas for a month. It wasn't. It
Is
wasn't.
he? Yeah, I can only imagine. Is he as fun as he seems like he would be?
I thought he was a blast, especially on that film. We had a great time. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
I remember a story of him and I playing blackjack until like 6 a.m. You
Oh
know,
God.
down in the casino. And I was falling asleep at the table, and we were winning, and having a blast. And yeah, I mean, he was a lot of fun. And then I would finish that movie, and then I would work with him again in 2014 on The Duel with him and Liam Hemsworth
Yep.
as well, and that was shot in Mississippi. So um,
Yep.
another good, a decent film. But I mean, it was, but Woody was good on that. More tense of a set, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
drama thriller type film, and it was a little bit more of a tense set than The Grand, which was like a comedy.
And it
But
was an improv comedy too, right? It was a
improv
lot of like,
comedy written by Zach
yeah.
Penn, has penned some of your favorite X-Men type films and Marvel films. He's done a lot of good writing for people that watch a lot of current superhero films, which I do. But yeah, he was great, and he wrote and directed that film. But yeah, it was like a script, like a 30-page script, and everything was ad lib pretty much.
Yeah, Cheryl Hines too, right?
Cheryl Hines, that cast is amazing. If you haven't
Yeah,
seen
it's
Brand, I mean, check it out. It's got Ray Romano, Jason Alexander, Gabe Kaplan from Welcome Back, Kotter, Cheryl
yep.
Hines, Hank Azaria. Yeah, I mean, it was loaded. Werner Herzog is in the film.
Yeah, dude, the movie's great. It's this weird little gem that exists out there that if you like the sort of not in the tone of Curb, but if you like that sort of
Right.
process, it's very Curb vibe, and it is fantastic. I remember you working on it, and I remember watching it, and just because I have this beautiful sign thing that you gave me, I still have it, and just watching this. I mean, that movie was just a lot of fun. So if you have a chance, that's another one. Again, we're bringing up stuff to get. We're basically curating the best of movies and giving you some story behind it, which I do think makes it more fun. You touched on something with the dual filming in the deep south of Mississippi, and I wanted to talk about this because there's a beautiful note here that maybe I've never considered. I did not know this. I've known you for, as we've prefaced, a long time,
Yeah, yeah.
and your dad's favorite movie is My Cousin Vinny.
Favorite movie that's probably not a John Wayne movie.
That's right.
Is
That's
probably
right.
how I should better phrase that. I mean, like he's into a lot of older films, but this is the movie, and we'll talk about. I mean, my dad will get mentioned on this podcast from time to time, but he's not a guy who goes to see a lot of films. I mean, he's
Nope.
not a big theater goer. He's been to theater, probably a few dozen times in my lifetime, here and
Right.
there, but and he's seen some movies and he sees them in patches. But this was a movie he wanted to see, and I've never seen him laugh like he does in this film. He loves this movie. He'll still watch it. I mean, I think he watched it. I know I saw it up on the TiVo probably within the last month. And
Right.
was watching it. He was watching it one day. So I mean, it's a film he brings out a little bit more often than some of them. So I know it's definitely high up on his list. And there's no way. I mean, he just laughs all the time. My cousin Vinny's classic though.
Oh, it's brilliant, and I think it's a big introduction. Not shot in Alabama, but a big introduction to Alabama for a lot of people. And it's one of the few times where there's we don't get painted. Alabama doesn't get painted in a totally terrible light, but there's moments in there, and it's fun. The thing that I think is interesting that maybe with your dad, if you don't mind talking about it, I think would
No,
be interesting is your dad is not born in the United
right.
States citizen. He is from, so I think it's interesting that you have a gentleman. I'll let you tee this up that comes to this country, has a little bit of Southern experience in Kentucky, Western Kentucky, or Kentucky somewhere, right? Or
Uh-huh.
somewhere, right?
Well,
I'll
you're-
let you tee it up. But could you just tell that? Because I think it's interesting that the maybe part of the reason why he loves this movie so much is because he gets to experience it external from everybody, not even Yankees and Southerners. He gets to see it from a third side of perspective. Tee that up because I do think it's a very interesting part of the story.
yeah, I mean, my dad was born in Iran, so I mean, he came up with a very like strict kind of upbringing, very Persian strict upbringing is what he's told me, of course, and I, obviously knew his parents, and when I was a kid, my grandparents, but yeah, I mean, he came over when he was like I mid teens, and he went to I finished high school here and Bowling Green, Kentucky, and then went to Western Kentucky University, which is why I'm such a big Western Kentucky Hilltoppers fan. A lot of different sports, but yeah, I mean, he went to Western Kentucky and met my mom in St. Louis, and they worked in different restaurants and stuff like that, and of course we move around, to New Jersey, and I think it was just that whole thing, like living from St. Louis to New Jersey
Right.
to Alabama, coming down to Alabama, and we had been in Alabama. This movie comes out in 1982, and we'd lived in Alabama for about 3 years at that point. Him a little bit longer because he moved to Alabama before us.
Right.
So yeah, he'd been down there. I think he just loved the mix of these northern characters and that New York vibe mixed with all these southern characters, and I think you can relate to it. And I think that's what makes it so funny is that when you did that, and I mean, yeah, of course, it was pretty fresh for all of us that saw it in our family because it was one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, we just moved from New Jersey, and all of
Yep.
a sudden we're down here, and this movie comes out within 3 years, and we're just all busting a gut because it's pretty funny and really relatable material.
It's interesting for me because I think back on it, and like obviously growing up together, I grew up down here, and being a Southern person at that point, and then here my best friend in the whole world and his family is all from the North, and you guys all had accents, and so in my own mind, it was always this little relationship of I'm sitting there and I don't know. I always just laughed. Like sometimes you guys wouldn't say Utes, but I would get something close to Utes.
Right.
I would get these little moments out of you guys that were just so standoff. So it's fascinating to me. It's really such a great moment to think about like your dad and you guys experiencing this. Your dad here by himself from another country, went to, grew up here more or less, but I mean, grew up part of his life in another country, lives here, builds his own way, makes his own thing, ends up in Alabama, and all of a sudden he's in the boat of like, what is this? Like, this is the strangest place I've ever lived. And he's literally experiencing, I can, I can hear him laughing because he has a very specific laugh and I can hear it. And it's one of those things that's like, that's one of those, another moment where that movie brings joy. Just this story brings joy talking about a movie. And that's the beautiful part about cinema. That's the beautiful part about this podcast. That's a beautiful part about what we're trying to explore by talking about it is those little moments exist and it doesn't happen. He doesn't have this as his favorite movie if you guys don't live in Alabama because it wouldn't have the same effect. I bet it wouldn't. And it's just so interesting to me that that's how it flows out.
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, and it's just such a great era too, because like that was another March movie in 1992, and Joe Pesci's just so big at that point,
Right.
and that's the thing about cinema too that I love is for snapshots in time of, Pesci's big in 1990s. He's not as big. He's big now. He's a legendary guy now, but you got to enjoy the ride when you're in cinema because it comes with there's fads, there's snapshots in time, and people are big then, and enjoy them then because it doesn't always stay that way, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Marissa Tomei wins an Oscar for this movie, correct? Yep, I remember that because I
Correct.
thought it was like again, uh, attractive lady. Not to go back there, I just remember as a kid, but I
Right.
remember like her performance being so good. But I also remember the gentleman who plays the judge was the Munster. Was he not the dad
Yeah,
on the Munsters? No,
yeah, Fred Gwynn. Yeah, Fred Gwynn
Fred
was
Gwynn. Thank you. Yep,
Herman Munster, and this is his last. This is his
yep.
last on-screen performance right here. I mean, this is it.
And he's
He passes
great.
away the next year.
He's great in this movie. And
Great.
the reason I bring it up is my dad had a friend who looked exactly, he's passed away as well, but he had a friend who looked exactly like him. And I remember back then, my dad, I'm not a hunter at all, but my dad was, and I would go with him to the camp. And this guy lived in Thomasville, Alabama, and we would go up there. And this guy looked just like him. And I would tell my dad all the time, he's the judge from My Cousin Vinny. Or Herman Munster. You know, I knew who he was. And he was always like the guy. I mean, he had the same stature. He was a very tall man, same exact vibe. And it was just always, it's always a nice little thing of like every time I see him, and specifically that scene because he has a Southern accent and that's what helped really sell the deal. But just it's a great little movie that's another film that like is a timeless comedy where everybody's been a fish out of water in one of them circumstances. And it's just a gold mine of a film.
Absolutely, for sure.
So, what is your take on it? So, Midnight Movies, obviously, a great episode, great putting this together, great show for sure. But if you look at this list, what is out of your list of these Midnight Movies? What's the one of this list that stands out to you as like the Midnight movie?
I gotta say it's. I mean, it's either Batman Returns or Bram Stoker's Dracula for me. I I don't know what it is about those moments, but those were such huge bits for me in big spots of time. I just really wanted to see those films. I mean, Alien 3 is great too, and they all have their own feel to them. And like you said, I mean, even being in the theater, final analysis was great. But yeah, Bram Stoker's Dracula is like maybe one. Batman Returns 1A. I mean, somewhere in there. I
Right.
mean, there's just it's hard to put like you know me. It's hard for me to ever put something above everything else. But
Yeah. Tony does not rank. You will never get a top 10 list out of Tony because they're
I
all
give,
10.
I give you 10 movies I like.
Yeah, that's right.
You
That's
know,
totally
not
right.
necessarily a top 10. But yeah, I mean those two for sure jump out as like wow. Those are
Yeah,
absolutely top
I
tier.
would I would say if you're looking at our list here that we've talked about on this particular episode, for me, I think the best midnight movie on this, because I have no problem ranking, for me is going to be Bram Stoker's Dracula. I agree with Tony on that. I think it's worth watching again. If you haven't seen it in a while, watch it. Make it fun, make it an event, make it a moment, even at home. Obviously, you're not going to see it in theaters unless some crazy, Alamo Draft House does something, but definitely sit down and watch that movie for sure. All of these movies are great on the list, but that's the one I would put it on as our homework for the week. If you're going to watch something, watch Bram Stoker's Dracula at midnight and have some fun.
And that was a big hit. But the one I'm going to say to watch, give it a chance, give it a look. Night in the City, Robert De Niro, Jessica Lange, because that's the one that's kind of the hidden gem, I think, because it's not as big as Bram Stoker's Dracula. Night in the City is the one that probably people need to kind of catch up on, kind of as a movie that they definitely haven't seen, probably.
There you have it. So that's going to do it with for the show. If you have a chance, if you haven't already, please head over. We're on Facebook. It's Back
Facebook,
for Our Future. Yep.
Back for Our Future podcast. Yeah, check it out.
Yep. That's on Facebook. We're on X or Twitter, whatever. You can find us over there. That one is back with the number 4.
Yeah, back the number 4, our future. The number 4, right? Back for Our Future at Back for Our Future with the number 4 instead of it spelled out.
That's great.
And then of course email us as well if you want to do that stuff. We got our Gmail, Back for Our Future Show at gmail.com.
That's great. And I tell you what we'll do is coming soon, we're going to have some a little bit of merch. We're nothing crazy, guys. We're not stupid, but we will have some stickers. And send us an email. Give us a heads up. Give us your favorite midnight movie. Give us that list, and we will We'll send out, we'll pick 3 and we'll just email, or an email. I wish I could email you a sticker. What's stupid? We'll mail you, old school, we'll analog you a sticker once we have those available. But yeah, send us your favorite midnight movie. We'll go through them. We'll pick 3 and we'll send you a sticker as soon as we have those available.
Absolutely.
Well, that's going to do it for the show. Thank you again for hanging out. We can't wait to see you at the movies. That's somebody else's tagline, isn't it?
That is, but that's okay. I guess we're kind of an ode to the past pop culture.
We'll see you guys very soon. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, everybody.